Welcome to this screencast. Now, what I've got here is the final version of the app we're going to be building here. And you can see we've got our flags and some information, and you should be noticing that there's a little bit of change. Our Oceania, North America are a slightly smaller font size. And now I'm going to click on Australia, and you can see I get this pop-up that comes in, and I can change the information in here. So I might say Oceania A, and I click save, and you notice I've now changed there in Oceania. And by simply clicking on one of those flags, it brings me to this screen. I'm going to make the change there. Click save, and we're back again. I might otherwise want to go edit, and I can click delete, and it's gone. I click edit again, and we're out of there. Now, if we come down to one of our other countries, let's click on Chile in South America, and I'm going to say in the region South America is found in the southern hemisphere of the earth. And that's full stop. I click save, and there you'll see what's happened is that information has been added, and things have automatically adjusted so that the information we've added is there nicely. One of the things you'll notice when we go through creating this app is we have a population value, but you'll see we haven't added it here. And that's one of the challenges at the end for me to leave with you. How would you add that population to the bit of information? And we've done it earlier in our previous version of this, and we'll go about it, or you would go about it in a similar way. But that's one of the final challenges. So this is the app that we're going to build. Let's get into the screencast of building the app now. Welcome back to the second part of this screencast. In this part, we're going to look at adding flags as well as editing flags that already exist. The way we will do this is through the inclusion of a bar button item that's going to allow us to click to add a flag. The way this will work is that when we click on that button, a new view controller is going to be displayed, and this will give the user the needed options to add the data. This view controller can also be used for editing a flag. This is where we will use the static table views. Why is that? Well, what the user is going to enter doesn't change. For our flags, we always want the same information: the flag, the country, the region, and the population. So with static view tables, a table view controller is used, but we don't implement the data source protocol. We implemented those in the other table view controller, but in this one we don't do that. What we're going to do is we're going to use the viewDidLoad method to populate the table with the data. So recall that there were data source methods already provided in the code. These we'll probably have to comment out or delete, but we'll come back to that a little bit later. So now let's get started. Let's go over to the storyboard, and let's click on our storyboard, and we're going to have this load for us very nicely. Let's give ourselves a little bit more space. And what I'm going to do now is I want to add a new navigation controller. So I come down here and I can bring it out from the objects palette, and you can see I'll drop it in there. It's a little bit crowded. Let's move it across so it spreads our work out a little bit. And what you'll notice is that as we've dropped our navigation controller in here, we've also got ourselves a brand new table view. So the next thing we want to do is we want to add a bar item to our original table view. So we come back here and into our object palette, I'm going to start typing bar item. And we can see here I've got my bar button item, and I'm just going to bring that up here and drop it in that slot there, and it will go in there nicely. The next thing I'm going to do is in the properties menu, I want to set that system item to add. So I'm going to need to bring that back up, and I'm looking now for my properties and the attributes. And I'm going to set, as I said, the system item to add. And I come down and I change that to add. So I've now got that ready for the next step. So the next thing we want to do is create a modal presentation segue that takes us from the bar button item to our new navigation controller. So here's our bar button item, and I'm going to control drag down into here and release, and it gives me the action segues, and I want to do a present modally. And I do that, and we'll see we've got a nice little arrow across there showing that we're going to do a modal presentation. The next thing we want to do is from the flag cell, so our cell here, we're going to also do another modal presentation into our new navigation controller. So let's do that. I haven't quite got the flag cell, so I'm just going to come up here and select it. Now I come back down here, control drag down onto here, and I go present modally. Now I want that modal presentation is actually got an identifier that we're going to call edit flag. So you can see I've got the two modal presentations or modal segues. I select that one and I can see that's what I want. And up here in the identifier, I'm going to change this now to edit flag. All right. Now let's build and run our app and see what we end up with. So here it comes. It's just taking a moment to build. And now it's going to launch. And here we have it. Now I'm going to click on the plus, and you'll notice that's now brought up my new table view in that sense, but there's no way to actually get out of it at this point in time. So that was with the plus button. Now I'm going to just stop it. I'm going to run it again. And this time, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select a cell, and you can see again, we've got that segue that brings us into our new controller. But again, there is still no way out of it. And we'll be fixing that up shortly. So let's exit the simulator, stop that running, and move on to the next thing that we want to do. Now, what we want to do is we're going to actually remove our implementation of table view did select row at that method, which is in our flag table view controller. And the reason is because tapping a cell executes a segue. So let's get rid of that line of code, or those few lines of code, back here in our flag table view controller. And we're looking for the bit of code. Here it is. Our table view did select row at, and all I'm going to do now is just comment that completely out. And now when we execute our code, it's going to be ensuring that the segue is executed and nothing else is attempting to execute. The next thing we're going to do is change the content of our new table view to make sure it's static cells. So I'm going to come back to main storyboard, and I'm coming down here, and I've got my table view selected. I can see that here, and I'm going to change from the content from dynamic to static cells. So we've now set those to static cells. The next thing we want to do is we're going to ensure that we actually have 4 sections. And the reason we want 4 sections in here is we want one for the flag, the country, the region, and the population. To do this, it is pretty straightforward. The number of sections, 1, 2, 3, 4. And you can see now we've had grouped sections. And you can see we've got section 1, 2, 3, and 4. So if I click on that, you'll see I've got 3 rows. So I can reduce that to 1 row because that's all I really need. And I'll do that on all of them because I'm going to have a section for each one of our things, the flag, the country, the region, and the population. But I only need 1 row in each of them. So we've set all that up now. And the other thing we want to do is we want to change the style of these. So we want to change the style to be that of grouped. So we've got plain or grouped, and we've done that. And you can see now how they have spread out a little bit. We want to change the names of our sections. So I can click on the section and change the name, and I want this one to be flag. So I just change the name to flag. The second section, okay, my second section, I want to change that one is going to be country. So country. The third section is going to be region. And the fourth section is going to be population. So we've now set those up. I'm hoping that you're going, but this isn't going to fully work, David, because we don't have text fields in them yet. And that's the next thing we're going to do. From the object library, we're going to drag text fields and drop them in for each one. So let's do that now. I've got my text field. I drag it up here using those alignments. I'll set it up. And it takes just a moment to do each one. That's looking really good. Now I would strongly suggest that you set some alignments to it. And we want to align it. I want to align it to the edges there. Okay. And I'll just go add those 2 constraints. I'm going to now grab again from my object library another text field, do the same thing again, constrain it. I'm going to constrain it to the sides, add my constraints, and I still have 2 more to go. You can see I'm lining them up in the middle. It's a little bit fiddly sometimes, as you're probably seeing from that, but that's just a normal part of coding. Sometimes it's flowing really well, and sometimes it just gets a bit fiddly. And let's drop our population one in. All right, oops, that's probably a little bit too far across. I missed that one there. Now we're better. And I'm just constraining it to the sides there. Hit the add 2 constraints, and we've done. You may want to add some more constraints. I'm deliberately not adding all the constraints because I want you to be thinking through what other constraints do I need to be adding to it, and go ahead and add more constraints and play around with it to see what you get. So let's build and run our app. Okay, let's come across, click our run button. Our build succeeded, which is always a good thing to see. And we've now got our flags of the world. So I'm going to click on one of these, and you can see now I've got exactly what I was expecting, and I can enter things into each one of the text fields. Looking at it, it appears I may not have aligned them as perfectly as I would have liked, but now after building it, I can go back and fix that. So let's stop the simulator and move on to our next point. What we want to happen is that when the user taps on a cell within the app, that the data that's in that cell is passed to the new static view table view controller. So if I click here on Australia, you'll notice that my static view controller has come up and there's nothing on it. And what we want to have happen is that if the user has tapped on a flag, then when it comes across to this controller, we've actually got that information all here. So that's what we're going to go about doing next. We're going to need to add a brand new class. So to do that, we're going to come up here to File, New, and we want a new file. And we're going to need one which is a Cocoa Touch class. That's already selected. Lovely. I'm going to hit Next, and I'm going to give it the name Add Edit Flag Table View Controller. So even before I do that, I'm going to change this one, and I want to see if I can find what I'm looking for, which is a table view controller. There we go. UI table view controller is the I want it to be a subclass of, and I'm going to call it Add Edit Flag Table View Controller. So Add Edit Flag Table View Controller. All looking good, and I click Next. Asks me where to save it. Yes, I want it saved within my project. And you can see now I've got a new class. What we want to make sure is that we don't implement any of the data source methods in this class. Because if you recall, this kind of a class will have data source methods, so we have to get rid of them so we can comment them out. So let's have a look through, and what you'll notice is the table view data source methods are already listed there for us. So all I'm going to do is select them all and comment them out. And now we don't need to be concerned about implementing them. We want to now go back to our main storyboard, and we're going to set our table view. So this new static table view, we want to set its custom class to be the new class that we created, the Add Edit Flag Table View Controller. So I'm just going to come across and I'm going to select to ensure I've got the right one. Yep. And here I'm going to click under Custom Class, Add Edit Flag Table View Controller, and that's done. So we've now set that as its custom class. Next, we need to add a property to the Add Edit Flag Table View Controller class, and it needs to be, we're going to make it a flag and of type flag. So here I come down to our Add Edit Controller, Add Edit Flag Table View Controller, and I'm going to put it up the top here, and I'm going to say it's going to be a variable, so var flag, and it will be of type flag. So, and we'll make it in that sense. So, the next thing after that is we're going to have to look at our prepare for segue method within the flag table view controller, because you have to think we're preparing to segue. So let's come to our flag table view controller, and what we're going to do in our prepare for segue method is we need to check the identifier when it's clicked, we're going to access our destination navigation controller. It needs to be then downcast to its top view controller, and we're going to add the object, passing and assigning them the needed properties. Now that sounds like a lot, but as we go through the code, you'll notice it's very much straightforward. So we're going to go and do that now. I'm going to scroll down to find the prepare for segue method, and here it is at the bottom, and I'm going to uncomment it so it becomes active. So what we're doing here is we're going to check the segue identifier. So if you recall, we set the identifier earlier to edit flags. So if we go and we're tapping on one of our flags, and then it segues to our next table view controller, our static one, we want to populate that with the data from the flag that we tapped on. And that's pretty much what we're setting up for here in this one. So how do we do that? Well, we're going to first have to check, is our segue identifier actually the one we're looking for? So we check if segue identifier is our edit flag. After that, what we're going to do is then we're going to get the index path, the row, and pull all that information in to start getting ready for populating it. So we let our index path, table view index path for our selected row, our index path be the table view index path for our selected row. Then after that, what we want to do is we're going to create a new flag, and that's going to be the flag from that row. And then after that, we're doing some stuff with our segue, our navigation controller and our segue destination, and a little bit more. So here we're creating a navigation controller, top view controller that we've called add edit flag table view controller. And then the last thing we're going to do is we're going to actually make our edit flag table view controller dot flag be the flag that we have created from the segue identifier edit flag row. So let's go up to main storyboard. We click on that. At the moment, this is called root view controller, which isn't the best name for it. And it's our add edit flag area. So I've just given it a new name so it relates a lot more to what we're doing. Now, the next thing we're doing is we're going to create outlets from each one of these text fields into the add edit table view controller class. So I'm going to make sure I've got that selected. I just click here and I've now got the text, the code sitting up next to me. We're a little bit crammed, so I'm just going to give myself a little bit more space to work with. And you can see doing that using the controls here. So I'm going to, hopefully you've all remember, I'm going to come from this here and just simply control drag into my code, and I'm creating an outlet, and the first one I'm going to call flag text field. So flag text field. Okay, and I hit connect, and there it is. I've now got an IB outlet weak variable flag text field. The next one is going to be country. Okay, so again, control dragging into here, and this one I'm going to call country text field. And click connect. I've got my country text field. The next one after that is going to be the region. So let's grab from here. Oops. Let's try that one again. As you can see, I'm also sometimes a little bit clumsy, so don't be concerned about that. And this one is an outlet, and we're going to call this one, let's click cancel because it's not quite on what I wanted. So that's better. I've got a UI text field. You can see that there. I had noticed that it was the incorrect one. So let's now go region text field and connect it. I'm a bit of a perfectionist. I'll bring that one up. And now my last one is the population. And again, control dragging. Oops. Gets a little bit fidgety sometimes, as you can see, and I'm just going to control drag up into here, insert the outlet, and of course this one is going to be population text field, and hit connect. So I've now got outlets, and as you know, with outlets we can start to configure them using information and data that we get. So that's what we're going to go about doing shortly. So we've got those set up, and now what we're going to do is in the viewDidLoad method, we're going to have to unwrap our flag options using our if-let syntax. So we want to find out if we've got a value, and if we have, that means if a flag was selected, we're going to update the contents of each text field within our corresponding flag properties. So we come down here into our viewDidLoad area and into our viewDidLoad method, and we're going to check if we've got the right one, if we've got the flag. So if let flag equal flag, and as we come back inside it, we're going to now check if the flag text field dot text, so if it's a flag exists, we're going to now fill our text fields that we've just created with the information from the flag that was selected. So I want to get the flag text field, which is the flag. After we've got the flag text field, I need the country text field filled. After the country text field, I'm going to get my region. And after the region, I'm going to get my population text field. So I've now filled that. So if we run our app, we can see what we've done. So I'm going to come across, run the app. It'll take a moment to build. We've added quite a bit to it since we last built it. Just waiting and waiting, and here we are, and I'm going to click Norway, and I've clicked on Norway, and you can now see that we have populated this window with the data from our selected row. The only thing is, you'll notice we still can't go back, and that's what we're going to fix now. So let's bring our simulator to an end. And the way we're going to go about fixing not being able to return or exit from that screen is we're going to add two bar button items, one to cancel and one to save to our view. So I'm just going to give myself still a little bit more space and even zoom in. So when you're working, make sure you're comfortable with the screen that you're seeing. So we're going to grab from here, we're going to grab a bar button item. So, and I'm going to drag one of the bar button items up here. And when I'm in this, what I want that one to do is that one is going to be cancel. So in my attributes area, I want the system item here to be cancel. And over on this one, when I bring the next one in, let's bring that in up here. I'm actually going to want to set it to be save. So I've now set those, and we can work with the code that we need to adjust them. So these buttons must trigger a modal dismissal of the view controller. So we're going to add an IB action method called unwind to flag table view, which is going to be take a segue UI storyboard segue, and we're going to add that in the flag table view controller file. So on my window, I'm going to bring back up the files, flag table view controller, and I'm just going to come up here and add it. You can add it obviously anywhere within the method, and I'm going to add it here, and it's just this one here at the moment, IB action function, unwind to flag table view segue, and it takes a UI storyboard segue. Now, to have the save and cancel buttons trigger this method, we're going to need to link them. And the way we're going to link them is actually from the storyboard. So let's come back here to the storyboard. And what we're wanting to do is we're going to control drag from them to the exit icon. And I'll show you that now. So I'm going to now link the save button back to the exit icon. So I need to open up my navigation controller scene here because that's the one we're going back to. And all I'm going to do is click on the save button, and I'm dragging it down to the exit icon here. So because I'm wanting to exit. Now, what we're going to see is that the method we just created, the unwind to flag table view segue, appears. And now I'm going to select it. And we can see here, it's now there. And what I want to do is I'm going to give it an identifier. And I'm going to give it the identifier save, unwind. We're going to repeat a similar process for the cancel button. I come across, click, control drag down to the exit icon. I get the unwind to flag table view with segue, and it's now linked. What I've done though, with the cancel button, I didn't give it an identifier. What you see is the two buttons trigger the same method, but one is with and one is without an identifier. And this is how, a little later, we will know how to process what the user has done. We will check for that identifier, and if it's the save unwind identifier, we will process things a little bit differently. So let's now build and run our app. It succeeded. Fantastic. Here we have it in front of us, and I'm going to now click on India. And I click on India, and the window comes up nicely, and I'll click cancel, and it's now gone. I'm going to go Norway, the same thing, and I can click save, and it's gone again. So it has closed our edit, our static table, and we're back here to our flags of the world. So it's all working. But hopefully you're going, David, we haven't done anything with the data. So let's keep going and taking the next steps in our app development where we start to deal with the data. So we want to make sure that the save button is only active if there is something to save. So we're going to write a function that will check for this. It's going to check each text field to see if it's empty or contains something, and see what's changed, what hasn't changed, and does the save button need to be active. So to do this, we're going to first have to create an outlet for the save button in the add edit flag table view controller class. and I'm going to call it something really fancy called Save Button. So let's do that now. So we're going to go to the Add Edit. Let's come back to the main storyboard actually and open up this one and then change this to be the text that or the code that we want. I'm going to do that. I'm just going to come up in here and click here, and I'm looking for the Add Edit Flag Table View controller, and there we have it. So I'm going to create the outlet for the Save button. Again, looking a little bit crowded. Let's give myself a little bit more room. And creating another outlet, I'm going to pop it down there. And as I said, I'm going to call it Save Button. And there we have it. My Save Button outlet is now in there. So I'm going to need to write a method that actually will check the text field to see if there's been any changes or anything along those lines. So let's go about doing that now and write the method, and I'm going to call it our update save button state. So let's find some space down here, and we go function update save button state. And then the next thing I'm wanting to do is simply go through checking each one of our fields. So the flag text, checking if anything has changed, if it's empty in that sense. And I want to check the country field. And of course, after the country field, I'm going to check my region field. And after the region field, I'm going to check my population field. And then finally, what I want to do is I'm going to be checking and enabling the save button. So we'll enable it if this one long Boolean returns true. So returning true, it's going to be enabled. So that was the code that we needed, and this method is actually going to be called from the viewDidLoad method. So let's go about adding that to our viewDidLoad method. So let's go about updating the viewDidLoad method. So I come back up inside. I want to be outside the if statement, and I now just have my update save button method is called. Now, to ensure that it is constantly checking if the save button should be enabled or not, the update save button state method needs to be called after every single key press. So to do this, we're going to create an IB action in the code and call the method the function text editing changed method, and that will call the update save button state. So let's now go about writing that code. So this is pretty straightforward to do. I'm just going to come down here and pop the code in. So I've created an IB action function, text editing changed, and it calls the update save button state. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to have to link this method to things. So we're going to go back to our storyboard, which we can see. So I'm going to give myself back a little bit of space. I've got my main storyboard there, and I'm going to select one of the text fields from our static table view and then do some control clicking. But first, let's give ourselves a little bit more space to see things. Okay, so now that we've got ourselves a little bit more room, I'm going to start at the flag text field, and I hold the control key down and I click, and you see I get this whole drop down menu. And what I want to do is here with the editing changed, I'm going to click from there and drag down to the method, which I should have actually got a little bit better organized earlier. So let's come back there. and this is where I want it to go to, and it's now connected. I'm going to do the same here with this one. Control click from the editing changed. I just drag out onto that method. That's connected it. Whoops. Control click on it. And then you can see from editing changed, we're going again and just repeating that process over and over again. There we go. So we've now set those and linked those all up. And I'm going to run my code, run our app, and we'll see what's happening with this. Our build has succeeded beautifully, always a good thing. And I'm going to click Australia, Oceania, and I'll come down, and you can see now that there's things missing. So my save button has actually disappeared, which is really what we wanted to have happen, because we only want to save when everything is filled in. So I'm going to click cancel and we come back to it. The next thing we want to do is we want to save our new flag when the save button is pressed. That sounds obvious, doesn't it? So to do that, what we want is before the save unwind segue is triggered, we're going to use all of the data from the different text fields and create a new flag model. We will set that to the flag property, and when the unwind segue is triggered, this is what's used to update the flags collection. So we're going to add the method prepare for segue in the add edit flag table view controller file. So we're going to go across to that one now and have a look at that. So we'll end the simulator and head across now to the add edit flag table view controller file. I bring it back up. I've got my add edit table view controller file, and you can see I've got my double windows again, just creating a bit more space here for me to work and to be able to see everything. So let's now come down to the bottom of this file, and here is our prepare for segue, and I'm going to uncomment it out. And then what we're going to do is we're going to be checking the guard condition that the save unwind segue is the one being executed, and then we update the flag property. So let's go about adding some code for this now. The first thing we're going to need to do is we're going to need to call the super class and the prepare for segue method in the parent class. So we do that, and then we start by checking. So we check our segue identifier to make sure it's the save unwind, and if it's not, then we exit. Otherwise, we can continue on. And then all we're going to do now is just be grabbing what is there in the text field and making sure that it's not blank in that sense, and setting it up so it all comes together. So I'll just grab this code and copy and be pasting it in. And the last one is our population. And now the last thing we're going to do here is we're actually going to create or let our flag now be what we want it to be. So we've got our flag object, it's of type flag, and there you see we're filling it with all of the information that was there and within the fields. The next thing, we're going to check in the unwind to flag table view segue method, and this is found in the flag table view controller class, because we're now going back to our flag table view controller window in that sense, and we're going to check if the save unwind segue was triggered. If it was, we need to check if the table view still has a selected row. If it does, we know we are unwinding after editing a specific flag. If it isn't this, then we're creating a new flag. When it comes to creating a new flag, we have to calculate the index path for the new row and add it to the end of the array. So let's do this now. Let's go to the flag table view controller Swift file. Here we are. Just going to make sure I've saved my changes there. And here in the flag table view controller, in my function unwind to flag table view segue, I'm going to start to add some code to it. Okay, so we're going to start with another guard condition. So we're guarding the segue identifier, making sure it's the one that we want it to be. And then we're going to then continue working through bit by bit, adding the code. So we want to let our source view controller be the segue source. And we go through this section here. If it doesn't work out, then we return because we've not got what we need for this one. Then we're going to check if our selected path, our selected index path, table view index path for selected row, we want to be checking on this to make sure it's what we're expecting. And in this case, we're wanting to ensure that it's our flag selected index path row is the flag. Okay. And then we're going to reload some of our table, or we're going to reload our table view. Now, if the if isn't true, we need an else statement. So let's come and put in our else statement. And with our else statement, we now are going to be looking at a new index path and appending a flag. So let's add some code that will do that. And then we also want to insert, in that sense, insert the rows at the correct index path automatically with our transformation. And that has that section of code now beautifully done for us. Okay, let's build and run the app. Amazing, fantastic, the build succeeded. As you've probably tell, I'm always excited about that. So I'm going to click on Canada, and we've got our information, and I'm going to just change it to say, let's get rid of North. And now I'm going to click Save. And as we've come back here, you can see we've actually updated that bit of information. I'm going to now click the plus sign, and I want to add a new one. And I'm going to actually click down in here and go, let's find a new flag, go to the emoji, and I'm going to click the pirate flag. And I'm going to call my country pirate. And I'm going to call my region ocean because piracy's in the ocean. And I'm going to say we have 22 of them. And I'm going to click Save. And now when I'm back here, I can scroll up and you can see it's been added. I've got pirate and ocean. All that information is there. Now at this point in time, we could leave our app here and we would be satisfied with it. It's all working. It's in good condition. But what we want to do is we want to take it a little bit further. We want to ensure that our text in the labels isn't truncated, that is, part of it gets cut off. So we're going to make a couple more adjustments to our tables and we will have it completed. Now, the important thing to note, with some of the constraints, I left you to add some constraints earlier on. And if you haven't added all the constraints, a couple of things might not appear exactly how we want to, but I'm also going to leave you with those ones to go and resolve it. So now let's come out of our app, let's stop the simulator and make those last couple of adjustments to have our app looking fantastic. Let's come into our storyboard. Here we go, we've got our storyboard here in front of us, and what I want to do now is I'm going to set back here in our flags of the world our bottom label. So our bottom label, we've got the country label, which is the top one, and the region label, which is the bottom one. And in the attributes inspector, I come across to my attributes inspector, keeping in mind here, what I want to do is excuse me, I'm actually going to set the number of lines to 0. So I see here the number of lines is 1, and I'm going to set that to 0. Because of the way things happen automated, it might not look different or that we've changed things, but we actually have. The next thing I want to do is in the viewDidLoad method, here in our flag table view controller, I'm going to add a couple of lines of code. So here we are, and the first line of code that I want to add to it is this line here, where the table view.rowHeight is automatically calculated and done for us. The next thing I want to do is I'm going to say, well, the table view estimated row height we set to 44. Now you might not realize it, but Interface Builder doesn't have access to our code, so it doesn't know about the cell heights we've just set. So we're going to need to do some adjustments similar to what we did earlier on with content hugging. So I'm going to come back to the main storyboard. And in the main storyboard, I'm going to go into my size inspector and set the top label's compression resistance to 751. So I'm wanting to come into the top label. I've done that, and I was looking there in the size inspector. So we're here in the size inspector, and I want to set the compression resistance priority to 751. So we'll do that. So it has now a higher priority not to shrink. And in the size inspector, we will set the bottom label's compression resistance to 752. So my bottom label, which is the region, I'm going to set the same thing to 752. Now, the vertical stack has a compression resistance of 750. So if I click here on my vertical stack, you can see it's set to 750 down here. So the auto layout engine knows that the stack view will grow to accommodate the larger amount of text. So we can now build our app and run it and add lots of text to those labels, and they're not going to be truncated. Well, we've come to the end of this screencast. It's been a long one, I realize that, but hopefully you've got a great understanding of what's going on, what's happening, and how we go about building the apps. So here we are, and the first line of code that I want to add to it is this line here, where the table view.rowHeight is automatically calculated and done for us. The next thing I want to do is I'm going to say, well, the table view estimated row height we set to 44. Now you might not realize it, but Interface Builder doesn't have access to our code, so it doesn't know about the cell heights we've just set. So we're going to need to do some adjustments similar to what we did earlier on with content hugging. So I'm going to come back to the main storyboard. And in the main storyboard, I'm going to go into my size inspector and set the top label's compression resistance to 751. So I'm wanting to come into the top label. I've done that, and I was looking there in the size inspector. So we're here in the size inspector, and I want to set the compression resistance priority to 751. So we'll do that. So it has now a higher priority not to shrink. And in the size inspector, we will set the bottom label's compression resistance to 752. So my bottom label, which is the region, I'm going to set the same thing to 752. Now, the vertical stack has a compression resistance of 750. So if I click here on my vertical stack, you can see it's set to 750 down here. So the auto layout engine knows that the stack view will grow to accommodate the larger amount of text. So we can now build our app and run it and add lots of text to those labels, and they're not going to be truncated. And the other one I want to do is I want to click on my flag label, and I'm going to set its compression resistance to 753. And the reason I'm doing that is so that it doesn't get moved as the labels change. Now the last one I want to do is I'm going to change my region label one more time, but what I'm going to change is I'm going to change its font. At the moment it's at 17, which is the same size as the country. But I want to make it just a little bit smaller. So I'm going to just reduce it, we'll say by 3 to a font size of 14. And now I'm going to build and run the app. Build succeeded, great news. And here it is. So I'm going to do something like here, New Zealand, Oceania, and then I'm going to say is a fantastic palace, let's go place, for so many things to happen. And I'm going to click save, and you can see what's happened there is it's adjusted. It hasn't pushed anything off the side or anything like that, and having it in that little bit smaller size just gives it a little bit extra oomph. So what we've done now is we've completed our app. This was a long one, I realize, but hopefully you found it very rewarding and starting to see how we go about building apps.